At the White House Correspondents Dinner, CNN anchor Wolf Blitzer came within a few feet of an armed gunman firing shots. The veteran reporter described the chaos he saw firsthand. He saw a big gun and heard loud bangs as the gunman fired. Blitzer was walking back to the ballroom when the terrifying incident suddenly erupted nearby. The security at the Washington Hilton was the tightest that Blitzer had seen in 30 years attending these events. Yet the gunman still managed to breach it with his weapons. Blitzer wondered how the gunman got. Police reached the gunman within a minute of the shots being fired. They protected nearby individuals, including Blitzer, by throwing them to the ground for safety. The quick response by law enforcement prevented what could have been a much worse tragedy at the dinner. Officers acted with incredible speed to neutralize the threat in the hotel. This frightening event unfolded one floor above the main ballroom where the correspondents' dinner was taking place. The gunman never made it inside the packed room full of guests. Blitzer expressed that it was a very frightening moment he will not soon forget. He was grateful to the police, who risked everything to shield him in that moment. Blitzer called the security incredibly intense and the tightest he had ever witnessed there. Somehow, the armed suspect still charged right through the checkpoint with deadly intent. The gunman was armed with a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives, officials said. A Secret Service officer was struck in his vest but is recovering in good spirits now. The suspect himself was not struck by gunfire but taken to hospital for evaluation. Authorities described him early on as a lone actor with no public danger apparent. Reporting shows the suspect is a 31-year-old from Torrance, California. He graduated from California State University Dominguez Hills and had ties to Caltech. The man did volunteer work at the Jet. There are no controversial posts from the suspect himself on social media accounts. He liked some complaints about federal employee layoffs in Washington, but nothing screaming radical. John Miller observed that this picture does not scream assassin at first glance. You have to wonder what drove this individual to such a desperate and violent act. The president stated he had no reason to believe Iran motivated this gunman. He indicated the true motive behind the attack remains to be fully determined by authorities. The entire evening was called off out of an abundance of caution after the chaos. Attendees slowly evacuated the hotel as law enforcement locked down the entire scene tightly. This happened at the annual media elite gathering with the president in attendance. Even massive security could not stop one determined man from getting dangerously close. America is watching yet another high-profile event descend into shocking violence. The elite correspondents' dinner turned into a scene of gunfire and panic in seconds. Wolf Blitzer's account brings the terrifying reality home to every viewer. Being feet away from an active shooter changes how you see the state of our country forever. How did our politics reach the point where even guarded Washington dinners are not safe? The breach exposes the raw fragility beneath the surface of civilized political life. Despite heroic law enforcement actions, the fact this occurred at all is alarming. It forces us to confront why political violence keeps targeting the heart of our institutions. What is happening in our society that turns seemingly normal young men towards such extremes? But this is just the surface of what really unfolded at the dinner last night. There is far more to unpack about why our politics have become so dangerously extreme and divided. Look closely at the background of this 31-year-old suspect from Torrance, California, and the contradictions become impossible to ignore in our current political climate. He attended California State University and even volunteered at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, yet somehow he decided to charge the Secret Service checkpoint armed to the teeth. His online footprint contained almost no controversial posts, only some likes on complaints about federal layoffs, which hardly explains his violent outburst at the dinner. Yet this seemingly ordinary tech guy somehow armed himself with a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives before launching his assault right outside the ballroom door. Wolf Blitzer found himself caught in the middle of it all, only a few feet away, as the loud bangs of gunfire suddenly filled the hallway. The veteran CNN reporter described the entire experience as extremely frightening and admitted it was a total coincidence that placed him so close to the active shooter that night. He even questioned in that split second whether he might have been a target himself before police officers quickly threw him to the ground for his own protection. This incident lays completely bare the staggering hypocrisy of the Washington media elite who constantly preach tolerance and democracy while their own gatherings turn into literal shooting galleries. The White House Correspondents Dinner supposedly celebrates freedom of the press and democracy, yet it required the tightest security Wolf Blitzer had ever seen in 30 years there. Even with magnetometers and the heaviest layers of protection, this determined individual somehow penetrated the security checkpoint to fire shots near the main ballroom area. Officials quickly labeled him a lone actor with no ties to larger plots, but that convenient narrative fails to address the rising tide of political attacks. The president himself dismissed any Iran connection to this attack, while the true motivations behind the gunman's actions remain under intense investigation by the FBI. The United States attorney highlighted that the defendant intended to do as much harm as possible at the event where thousands were gathered to hear the president. Thankfully, the layered checkpoint worked perfectly, and the rapid, heroic response by law enforcement prevented what could have been a massacre inside the ballroom full of journalists and politicians. Yet the fact that this violence could erupt so close to the heart of the event shows just how deeply our society has become torn apart by hatred. The attendees who came expecting a lovely evening suddenly found themselves ducking for cover as law enforcement officers sprang into action all around them in the hotel. Janine Pirro described the eerie moment when the entire room went completely silent after the shots were heard, with every law enforcement officer standing ready to protect the crowd. These are the very same people who claim to defend our sacred democratic norms, but their fancy event required an army of agents just to keep basic order. The suspect was quickly taken into custody after exchanging gunfire with agents, and the officer who was hit in his vest is recovering well, according to officials. But serious questions remain about how this individual managed to slip through such heavy security and what exactly drove him to target this particular high-profile Washington gathering. The FBI and Secret Service promise a thorough investigation, leaving no stone unturned, yet the public has heard these very same assurances after previous violent incidents. This pattern of escalating political violence, whether directed at presidents or exploding at major public events, signals that something fundamental has gone terribly wrong in the American body politic. Our once gentlemanly American political discourse has completely given way to extremism and raw rage that now spills into real-world gunfire, even at the elite press dinner. And as the dust settles from this shocking breach at the Washington Hilton, the deeper truths about our collapsing national unity are only now beginning to emerge. Yet what those deeper truths reveal about our collapsing national unity is a country where even the most heavily guarded elite events can explode into sudden gunfire without warning. The suspect's unremarkable nerdy tech background from California universities and the Jet Propulsion Lab makes this armed assault at the dinner all the more baffling and frightening. Wolf Blitzer found himself only feet away from the gunman, wondering if he himself might have been the intended target in that terrifying, chaotic moment. The same media elites who lecture, even with the tightest security Blitzer had witnessed in 30 years, the gunman still breached the checkpoint, armed with a shotgun, handgun, and multiple knives. Officials rushed to declare him a lone actor with no wider connections, but such quick assurances do little to calm growing public fears about political violence. The president himself saw no evidence linking this attack directly to Iran, leaving the true motive behind this brazen assault still shrouded in complete mystery. The United States attorney confirmed that the defendant had clearly intended to cause maximum harm and damage right outside the ballroom packed with thousands of prominent guests. Heroic Secret Service agents and Metropolitan Police officers responded with incredible speed and bravery, tackling the threat before it could reach the main dinner inside. Yet the entire evening was abruptly canceled out of an abundance of caution as shocked attendees slowly evacuated the Washington Hilton through the escalators in disbelief. This shocking breach right at the heart of Washington power proves exactly how fragile and vulnerable our most important public institutions have truly become today. When those shots rang out, the entire ballroom fell into an eerie, complete silence while law enforcement officers stood ready to defend the frightened crowd inside. These are the same political class, and the multi-layered security system worked this time, but the frightening reality is that such extreme measures are now sadly necessary, even at a simple press dinner. What drove this 31-year-old college graduate with seemingly ordinary interests to suddenly launch this violent attack remains the most disturbing, unanswered question of all. Our once gentlemanly and civil political culture has been utterly destroyed by rising extremism that now manifests regularly in real-world gunfire at elite gatherings. The glaring hypocrisies of the ruling Washington class stand fully exposed, as their supposedly safe celebratory dinner turned into an active battlefield in mere seconds. This single incident forces every honest American to confront the brutal truth that our nation has been torn into bitterly hostile pieces beyond easy repair. The FBI and Secret Service vow to leave no stone unturned in their investigation, yet Americans have heard these promises many times before after similar horrors. Thankfully, the rapid professional response by law enforcement prevented any massacre inside the ballroom, but the sheer terror experienced by those present will not fade away quickly. America's political discourse has degenerated into something completely unrecognizable and dangerous, where even the Washington Hilton cannot provide basic safety from this growing societal rage. The hard lesson from this breach at the White House Correspondents Dinner is now painfully obvious for anyone willing to see it with completely clear eyes. Our country is dangerously and perhaps fatally divided, and ignoring this reality any longer will only invite far worse tragedies in the very near future.